17 Construction Squadron in Vietnam was readily identified by the Little Bear logos on their vehicles and the motto, "Little Bears'll fix it." Proud of its work in building roads, bridges, water and sewage systems, operating quarries, and constructing housing for Vietnamese Regional Force soldiers, the squadron recorded major projects in 1970 and 71 in a scrapbook. It now resides in the home of the Sapper Steel Barracks, Casula, New South Wales. Nominally based at Nui Dat, the 500-strong squadron was spread all over the province, including on bridging projects on Route 23 from the province capital Berea to Suen Mok in the east. The largest of these was Bridge 6, some 15 kilometres from Nui Dat. It spanned the Song Rai River, whose floodplain was a major rice-growing area. Bridge 6 replaced an old Bailey Bridge which was too small and frail for the long-term economic needs of the province. The arrival in the squadron of a set of plans for the bridge in November 1970 set in train detailed design work, calculation of bills of materials, ordering and detailed planning for the project.
I was the construction officer for the project, essentially ensuring the quality control of the bridge. I first became aware of Bridge 6 when I was placed on detachment to 198 work section to have a look at some of the original design drawings for the bridge.
Bridge 6, from my memory, was designed to take a tank and a transporter. That was the criteria. And I think we had a team of about 4 guys on it, a couple of engineers, one to design it, one to check it. I did some design and some of the drafting on it. In fact, I think I did quite a bit of the drafting on it.
I set about doing the detailed critical path diagram for the bridge construction from go to woe. As a result of all of that, we were able to determine what resources we needed, what plant, how many people, of what kinds of trades. And the bottom line was it was going to take 35 people, 5 months to build this bridge. And we relied upon the expertise of the senior NCOs in the squadron. These are the guys with the practical expertise in building things. Then they could take a set of drawings, translate that into a bill of materials, and then the orders could be placed.
The squadron had up to 80 projects going at any one time. Prior to deploying to Bridge 6, the bridge builders were finishing off other bridges on Route 23, working on Berea Hospital and on Berea Markets, and building or repairing roads around the province.
We did a lot of work. I actually worked on the water drill for a while. I worked on projects mainly around Berea and then Bridge 6.
Did all my work from Nine Troop and ended up going on a lot of projects such as Bridge 3, Bridge 5 and Bridge 6.
First project I was on was the Berea Hospital, curbing and guttering, and within the hospital. And then the next one was Bridge 4. We went out and finished off Bridge 4. And then from Bridge 4 we went on to Bridge 5.
Well, when I first got to Vietnam, I ended up in Nui Dat, and then ended up going to work in Berea Markets, at the hospital in Berea. Did a bit of work around the camp, and I did my trade certificate in the base of Nui Dat with the army.
I was actually a driver for the captain of 9 Troop. The 2 captains I had, I was driving for both of them, and when I wasn't doing that, I was doing construction labouring.
I think the first week I was a brickage labourer out at Berea. We were building concrete, homes for the villagers, and then Oh, we're just doing culverts and roadworks and
We've done mainly transport and labouring, transport and labouring work I've done over there. Well, we carted gravel from the quarry at Nui Dat up to Route 2, plus I'm not sure about dirt, and then we carried a lot of dirt and that out to Bridge 6, and we've done that, plus we've done carted sand from out to Long Lake.
I was based in Nui Dat when I first got there. First we were doing the curbing and culverts and everything around Berea and all those places. We did a bit of work on the huts for the Arvin village, and then I headed up on Bridge 5.
Work around the outside perimeter of the DAT, bit of drain clearing and that with the front end loaders. And then it was out to Bridge 6 where I spent most of my tour.
Oh, but basically we're doing a lot of, there was major road works actually. The main road route from Berea, which is the capital of Phuoc Tuy province, up north was one of the main routes, and that was the one that we were mainly concentrating on working.
The bridge site was surrounded by a minefield, and this had to be cleared before any work could start.
I was part of One Field Squadron. We never called it Bridge 6, it was the One Field Squadron, the Songray Minefield. It was just a, it was like a big old grass paddock actually. It had a down-up wire around it and quite big. I just sort of got into my mind that, you know, it could have covered 25 acres even, in 4 sections. The dozers actually, as they do, skirted the whole field to start with, and then they dug a great big slot across there. And then they started skimming. But effectively, a lot of the mines rolled out the corner of the blade. Some they missed completely because it was a wet area and they'd sunk. And our job as a mini team, we were, myself as a number 1 and my mate, was to visually grab the ones that you could see. That I think we found 600 mines, and I think there was 1,000 in the minefield. In a job like the minefield, I was compelled as a number 1 to keep a record of what we'd actually found. So I'm looking now at the 17th of the 2nd, the 18th, the 20th, the 21st. And on the 18th, for instance, we found 43 M16s, 1 M26 grenade and 1 M79 grenade. And the dozer obviously detonated 1 M16. And number 2 worked with me for a little while, and we got ready to do our usual stunt in the minefield, and we put the flak jacket on, and he said, "It's funny that, isn't it? We've been sitting here all day, just nice, and then we put the flak jacket on and all of a sudden we're sweating." And he was suggesting it wasn't the flak jacket, it was the fact that we were about to go in and pick up a few mines.
Starting with a paddy field now cleared of mines, the first task was to cart in a lot of fill. It came from the quarry at Nui Non and was used to build a night defensive position and to realign the road approaches to the new bridge.
Before we even thought about setting out the bridge, we had to set out the actual camp site. There were mines on that in that area, and in fact, the first time I put up the theodolite, the 2 legs were okay. When I put in the 3rd leg, my foot was about literally 4 inches, maybe even 3 inches away from a mine.
To establish a quarry, now there is always quite a lot of work to be done to excavate all the non-usable material. Then you would require a loader of some sort, either a mobile the 966 with a bucket on, or excavator with a bucket on, to load and for transport, whatever type of transport you could get. Normally there would be a small tip truck, maybe a W18 big dump truck, which we had half a dozen of those. They were very slow, but they were good on capacity.
Carried a lot of gravel and rock out to the bridge, used in actual making of the bund, and also the abutments on the bridge. They were built up with rock to front onto the bridge.
When you take the fill to your project, it's normally dependent on the type of transport. A dump truck is, yes, it dumps the load. Then that load has to be spread out, normally done by a grader, which normally was a Cat 12 grader at in those particular times. Now that would also entail you'd have to have a water cart to try and keep the dust down. You would have to have the various types of rolls to do your compaction.
Well, it was an interesting thing. I knew the driver, he just got a bit too far over the edge. The road wasn't actually too traffic laneway, and you shared it with all the. And I think what's happened was he was trying to avoid an ox cart. If those ox carts didn't move off, you had to move off, because you had to give away to the ox carts anyway. And that tipped him on his side, or practically he wouldn't have been able to move the vehicle without assistance from a crane to pull him back, or a D8 or something to pull him back up onto the road.
Night Defensive Position Susan was home to 35 bridge builders for 5 months. It was an isolated and Spartan place, but not untypical of the conditions under which men of 17 Construction Squadron lived on projects remote from Nui Dat.
Inside it, the tower was sort of in the middle of it, and there was a tent for the kitchen and the radio, and one of them cooker things, whatever, I can't remember what they were called. And there was a shower block, and it was like somewhere you could sit of a night time that no lights shined, like a little shack. In the dry, because it was like road base in the bottom of it, everything was sort of dusty and dry, and it was hard. And then when the wet came, all the water just laid on top of it. It was about 8 metre to a bit over a metre embankment right round the outside in a triangle, and our hutchies were in metal culvert back in the inside, and the 3 points of the triangle had a bunker in them. And on the outside of the bunker we had barbed wire with claymores mounted here, there and everywhere around the outside. I do remember in the wet that all the grass grew, long spiky stuff, and it was higher than the bank. And I remember once we cleared it all by setting all the claymores off.
First day. There's nothing here. There's just this triangular bund thing. Right, boys, what we've got to do is fill sandbags. Got to find somewhere to live. Got to make a hutchie. Oh, yeah. Who's filling sandbags? Guess what? You are.
Experienced by then, because we were trained in Liverpool to fill a sandbag. I don't know why you want to be trained to fill a sandbag, but yeah, we just had the road culvert up, you know, like an egg shape over, and then we just start up each side with sandbags. When we had our time, it wasn't sort of built straight away, so we had to live in an unprotected thing for a while, and then we built the front wall then.
We had a little hut there which was called a blackout hut. It was light inside, but you couldn't see anything from outside it. So you could actually sit down and write letters if you wanted to, or read a book. But that was only for a certain length of time. Then the lights went out.
Smaller than some of them, although it was just supposedly an NDP, it was fairly well set up. And in some ways I thought it was probably the Hilton of some of the NDPs. It was well set up, well maintained, and they'd made themselves quite at home.
Oh, I thought it was open. I really thought it was very open and quite dangerous. Far too exposed, because there was nothing around it other than the Yeah, there was nothing to give you any protection. There was nowhere to run to. I didn't like it. I never liked it.
Well, we had a job there one time. We built a dunny and we needed to brighten it up because it would have rotted or it looked a bit boring. So we had to get some paint to do it. So I think one of us went back to Nui Dat to our painting room, our sign writing room, and acquired some paint that was not being used, and we painted the dunny. I think we're told we had to paint it, but not specific to that colour. I think we're thinking of olive drab or bronze olive or something in the camouflage colours, but I think we all got used to it after a while, and we quite liked the blue and the white and the red.
Well, the policy at the time was for the men who were working at the bridge site to get one hot meal a day to supplement their normal rations. I was responsible for quite a lot of the time to load the helicopter.
Joe and myself used to have to get the Land Rover, go up to HQ and pick up any mail or any correspondence from there, and then go down to the kitchen and pick up the hot boxes, the food for the troops that were out there, and then some drinks from the boozer, and then take them down to the helipad, stack them on the helipad, and then take the Land Rover away, and then the helicopter would call in to ask us whether we were ready, and we'd say yes. And they would come in, land alongside the pile of supplies to go into the helicopter, and Joe and myself used to load them in, unaided by the helicopter crew. We'd load it all up and then move back, give the thumbs up, and then they would take off.
CRT come out from Nui Dat every night on the helicopters, and we had to go out then to bring them in. We weren't they wouldn't come and land just outside our area there unless we had to go out with a smoke grenade, and I'd run out. We'd have to run out the smoke grenade and set it off out there where the helicopter was landing, because he'd call in and say he was coming in, be blah blah blah. I'll be in a few minutes' time, but he said, I want a yellow smoke grenade out, so you'd have to get a yellow smoke grenade race out, set it off. And then he'd come in and he'd say, okay, I've spotted the grenade and coming in, so he'd come in and land. Then 3 or 4 he'd run back out, then pick up all the little eskies about so big, full of food, and bring it back in, and he'd take all the empty ones and away you go.
Our first few nights we weren't secure. The only thing we had around the camp was dump trucks, and we had chaps sitting up in those dump trucks at night time with a machine gun. At that stage we had never had our gun emplacements in order. The dump trucks were there so we could look over the wall. And during the course of the night, when the pickets were changing, one fellow trod on a clacker, and with result a claymore went off, and I think at that stage there might have been a lot of underpants changed.
I can tell you the truth, what happened that night. Nobody stood on the clacker, on the claymore. What happened, I can't remember, I was on duty that night, and Ferris was there with me, and I can't remember whether it was me or him climbing up on the back of the truck, because that's where we did the duty that first night. And climbing up the truck, we kicked one of the wire that hold the claymore trigger. The trigger fell to the ground, and the trigger itself hit the ground first, and the safety gave away and fired the claymore. And that is the truth. Well, thanks God, he's pointing in the right direction.
While NDP Susan was a long way from Nui Dat, it had lots of neighbours. A Regional Forces platoon guarded the old bridge. There was a village just across the river, and the road was a busy one. So there were plenty of opportunities to interact with the neighbours.
The locals were the bridge guards and their families who
lived in these little houses on the side of the road made from sandbags and ammunition cartridges. So they lived a fairly primitive existence in little huts on the edge of the road, really just kind of existing. I really don't know how they survived, but
we didn't have that much. Well, we depended on them during the day to guard the bridge, the safekeeping of us, from people going through the road from us, to provide our safety. But whether that was adequate, I'm not sure. I remember one night that I was on picket on duty, and there was a lot of noise coming from across the river. I was ordered to open fire. So far, there's one up in here, one into the ground. Then we found out that they were the local troops from across the road. But they're quite bad.
Go over there just with the ration packs and stuff, because they didn't need a lot. I think they just lived off the land, poor beggars, and then we used to take a box of goodies over, and they used to cook us up their local meals. Don't know what we're eating. We don't probably need to know.
We did have some ladies of the night that worked just off Bridge 6, and we used to communicate with them a bit as well, but I think the people were always friendly and grateful for what we could do for them.
Basically, everybody used to walk past and used to be a suspect, because they used to be there. You didn't know during the day you used to work for us, and night time they used to shoot at it. So you just took everybody as they came.
NDP Susan had an air of vulnerability about it, being beyond the range of task force guns and responsible for its own security.
Yeah, this little turkey's nest just stuck there with a guard bunker in each corner sort of thing, and we thought, oh no, what have we got here? And like you say, we didn't have any infantry there, and we just had 2 or 3 APCs, and that was it, and we just had to do our own guard duty at night.
I remember Major Sanderson saying to me that he was terrified for the first few nights for our boys because we had no security. And after arrival of the APCs, they had night vision scopes, which made it a lot easier for us to see if there had any movement outside our wire. So they'd come in late in the afternoon. They were out setting ambushes during the day. They'd come in late in the afternoon, set up on our 3-gun emplacement. The security was the pickets be on duty 2 hours on, 2 hours off, and in the 3-gun placements every night. But 9 times out of 10, we used to sit up in the APCs with the 50 cal, because it was just a little bit higher and a bit cooler, and you didn't have to worry about scorpions.
Another night, a trip flare went off. Well, which alerted everyone again. By this time, nothing much has happened, so you get a little bit laid back, and hot. So you're sleeping in sort of no clothes, and so you fellas are running around. Trip flare goes off. Fellas are running around and no helmets. Helmets and no clothes. Up on the mound, firing their rifle. I'm in the bunker with the sergeant, and there's Captain Pearce come in to the bunker, and Cole says, "There they are, Pedro, open up." And Pedro forgot everything he ever learned. I just went to pieces, and this Cole White threw me outside and said, "Fire flares up." And the APCs by this time are firing all these 50 calibre rounds over the top. Everyone's firing, and Cole took off, he let fly on the machine gun, and after that we got up in the morning, and there wasn't a thing out there.
In July 1971, it was reported that Viet Cong Battalion D445 was moving along the axis of the Song Rai River. The effect on the NDP was immediate, but fortunately benign.
Major Sanderson came in, he said D445 is moving, and everyone be on their mettle, and be mindful and be on alert, and you thought, okay.
Well, I think he got the impression that we weren't really switched on to the situation as well as he was. But we did quieten down a little bit after he left.
I remember the artillery up on the hill to the, what was it, the northwest of us. I think it was the northwest. And basically nothing eventuated in that position.
Bridge 6 comprised 3 spans, supported on 2 11-pile bents. Each pile was a 12-inch steel tube with a driving point fastened on the bottom. The work began on driving piles almost as soon as the NDP was occupied.
The 22RB excavator fitted with a pile driving rig. The excavator operator had to lift it up, then he'd have to release it and it'd come down back.
We were using just an initial trip, just weight and trip type hammer, which I know nothing about hammers then or now. And then somebody got hold of the diesel pile driver.
We obtained through Saigon, that the engineers in Saigon, I think it was Colonel Hutchison at the time, we suggested that he might be able to obtain a diesel hammer which would reduce the time it would take in the operation and the building of the bridge operation in pile driving.
Well, this thing went bang, 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 and you see the puffs of smoke coming out of it. You say, well, how the hell does that work? But by golly, it drove those piles in pretty quick.
It would be too much to expect, however, for all 22 piles to go in smoothly, and as sod's law would have it, one of them got into trouble.
They had a rock ledge underneath but wouldn't go anywhere. And the rock ledge just impacted back up the pile and snapped it. And where it was stuck, they had to put another pile in, and the thing was to get rid of the old one, was to blow it.
And so I was involved in designing a plinth, as we called it, to go across the top of some replacement piles and be able to act as the right bearing for the booms when they came in.
17 Construction Squadron had a small concrete batching plant and fleet of transit mixers. But early in the planning for the project, it was decided that the distance from Nui Dat to Bridge 6 and the condition of the roads were such as to make delivery of quality concrete difficult. So all 140 cubic metres of concrete for the project was mixed and placed by hand.
So mixing the concrete, that was something different again. We actually had to weigh batch the mixture, which was sand, cement and gravel and water. My job at that stage was to actually put the mix into the skip bin so it could put into the mixer, which was a 16 cubic foot mixer, and then it would mix up and then get poured into barrows and then shoveled, or initially for filling the piles was put into big skips, which the P&H cranes actually lowered over the piles and dropped the concrete into it.
We're mixing the concrete to fill them, I remember that. 2-ton bag of cement, and because we used to strip off and when I got down too far, I used to get inside and shovel it out. We'd finish the day with what hair we had was really stiff. And
quite a few piles there that you had to fill full of concrete so that you could actually pour a support structure for the beams. We poured the piles full of concrete, then we set about putting up the formwork for the seats that these beams are actually going to sit on.
Yes, we did some of the formwork, yeah. Did quite a lot of that, yeah. Well, this thing you do after the formwork, you're still tying and pouring the concrete and trying to finish the concrete with a helicopter nobody could use.
I got a good job out there one day. Somebody left the cement mixer and we had to get in there with the jackhammer and broke it up. And that was a good job, especially when it was 140 in the shade.
Enforcement down, laying down, it was all had to be twitched together to hold it together. Well, we had little tiny bits of wire about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches long, and a little machine. You'd wrap it all up to wind it all up, and we'd help them do that. And that took days to get all that reinforcement put on. And I think, if I remember rightly, they used to do a section of the bridge at a time. and that was all done. And that was poured. It was left for about a couple of days before we'd go back and do the next section.
Right at the last pour, we dropped all the plywood and all the timber into the river. That was a bonanza for the locals. They loved it. All this building material, all this timber, they could actually use.
We used to pour test cylinders and take those to Bien-Wa base, which is an American base outside of Phuoc Tuy province, and have them tested for their 28-day strength. They always came back as very good quality concrete, and we were really pleased with the jobs that the guys had done, the troop had done out on the bridge.
Such was the proficiency of the crew by this stage that they were pouring 6.5 yards of concrete by hand in 4 hours with a crew of just 8 people. Bridge 6 comprised 3 spans, each of 7 beams. The 80-foot centre spans were made up of 2 20-foot lengths welded to each end of a 40-foot section. This required high-skill welding and a delicate and often photogenic placement.
Got the girders in. We got them onto pads that were already laid down for level and squareness and straightness and all that type of thing. We just put the steel girders on these pads, lined them all up, used theodolites and all that type of equipment. When they were all lined up, we then come along and did what we had to do to the girders.
When the beams used to come out, they were all tapered on the end so they could join together because they couldn't bring them out in one big bit. So we had to try and get them level and straight before they were welded. And that was a bit of a job because they were little small beams that sort of push around everything like that.
And I think that we used to have to brush all those with a steel brush, and I think they were primed or something with a yellow colour, and there's oxide stuff on them or something.
We didn't have any mechanical welding to do. We had nothing to do with mechanical welding. All our welding was done by, as it turns out, in the main, National Service kids of about 22, 23 and 24 years of age. I just told them what we had to do. We'd do what we had to do to get all the stuff in place, and I could leave them as tradesmen to do their job, and they did it magnificently. There was electronic testing done. The Yanks did that themselves. The actual reports I saw indicated that these guys really knew what they were on about. In fact, one of the Yank examiners, said to me on one occasion, where are the welders? And I said, well, they are there. And they were just ordinary Volkswagen welders that were on company code behind their Land Cruisers. And he said, no, where's the mechanical welders? And I said, well, we don't have them. I said, the mechanical guys are standing alongside the machines over there, they're guys. And this guy, this particular day, just couldn't believe that the welds he was looking at on the steel girders were in fact done by hand by the guys he was looking at.
Yes, I was there for the beam placements. Well, it came with the crane. Well, actually it was moved on the 2 trucks, one facing to the right, one facing to the left, and driven up, and then the crane picked up and moved into place, and with a lot of yelling and screaming, and I remember a certain captain who wasn't always pleased with the way things went.
It's really only as difficult as the person who's guiding the crane. If the guy guiding the crane knows what he's doing, it's not too difficult at all.
It was good to watch your theatricals because you were doing what we already had in mind. Pretty well organised. We knew what we had to do, what the objective was, and we both had the same thing in mind. Although looking at the actual, I would have put that beam in the centre of that truck instead of on the right hand side. At Jamie's end, I'd say. I don't think they were all that heavy, those beams, because when we were taking them off and up over the Bailey Bridge and out onto the actual abutments, there was a fair reach on a couple of them, and the crane was so solid it wasn't moving it.
Placing the 80-foot beams over the centre span, that was the part of the whole project that worried me the most. They picked up the beam off the back of these two trucks, swung it up over the Bailey Bridge, and lowered it onto the pre-prepared pads on the pole caps. Now, the beam sat on a 3/4 inch neoprene pad, and they were bolted down to the pole cap. I knew this was going to be a dramatic exercise, and I was hell-bent that we were going to have the first beam in place before anybody came along to tell us how to do it. So bright and early the first morning that we were ready to place that first beam, we got up, we put the beam in place, and by the time everybody, all the tourists arrived to see how this was going to be done, the thing was covered in muddy footprints where everybody wanted to walk across it. The nice thing about that was that even though we got lots of visitors during the time we were replacing the remaining 6 beams, none of them took the opportunity to offer us advice on how we could do it better.
Bridge 6 was a popular stopping-off place for visitors to the task force. From the Minister for the Army to the Chief of the General Staff, to senior and junior members of the 1st Australian Task Force, they all came to look, to photograph, and occasionally to advise. Almost all were welcome, and a few even stayed overnight.
We used to get a lot of sticky beaks, you know, from Vung Tau, Nui Dat, everywhere. But the thing is, we never had time to worry about it.
No, you're not greeting them and saying goodbye to them, you're actually doing things, working.
A padre come out from Nui Dat, and he spent the night out there, if I'm right, and he gave us a Anzac Day service.
It seemed to be quite appropriate we should have had that. The fellows all joined in the service very much, although a lot of them probably wouldn't have gone to other services, but that was the way it was. But it was very much a telling service. We were out there in the field, there was an armed guard around the bund, but they all felt that this was something that part of their history, part of the tradition of the Australian Army, that they should be there, and they all joined in that very much. They had a job to do, and would, as far as I could see, were doing it very well. They were a happy bunch of people. They all seemed to be keen on what they were doing, and so I found the engineers really quite a good bunch of people to work with.
By the 3rd week of August 1971, the squadron was reporting that Bridge 6 was 99% complete. Just handrail painting and expansion joint filling was left to be completed. The project was completed a few days inside the time allocated to it. NDP Susan was disbanded and the site cleared.
I was set out to oversee the completion of Bridge 6 and to undertake some reinforcing and extension work to Bridge 7, which was a single Bailey, about a kilometre further east on Route 23. Yeah, as I recall, all of the concrete pours were finished. The work that was really being done was getting the handrails in place, painting the handrails, generally cleaning up and building the approaches. The approaches on both sides were pretty rough, and there was a need to bring them up to level, of course, and realign the road, because the road was really focused on the old Bailey, and to realign the road and bring those approaches up to speed. We finished the project. We reported that we were finished. Sometime before we finished, an ARVN unit from Swan Mock had appeared and asked whether or not they could have the material in the scale ale facilities, the latrines and the cookhouse, and they weren't required back at Nui Dat, so we had said yes. And so all I recall is that a truck turning up, we loaded it up and the gear headed off, but there was never any formal handing over of the bridge from us to anybody representing the Vietnamese government or the military.
Bridge 6 no longer stands. Its life was cut short, not by construction failure or by enemy attack, but by the rapid growth of the local economy, with which it could not cope.
Bridge 6 was something that was very meaningful for me, because it was something that was that it was the only part of me that remained in Vietnam. It was an absolute shock for me when I went there, and I had to qualify myself a couple of times, but it proved right that what I said was that I was at the right position. It was just that there was no Bridge 6 anymore.
Going out there to see Bridge 6, the road itself was a modern, sealed, wide, two-lane road that would not be out of place in Australia. And coming up to the bridge when we finally got there, of course we'd already seen photographs of the bridge, it was a bridge that would not be out of place between driving on a country road outside of Canberra. The bridge itself, there was a centre pier in the water, then there was concrete beams across the pier onto the abutments, and was topped off by a concrete slab. Under the bridge, the one thing I was looking for is the photograph you showed me of the concrete pile cap that Phil Limbris found a year or two before, and that's still there, although it was covered in some debris from a flood. But the most interesting thing I found was one of the piles that Bob put in back in 1971. It was sticking about a foot up from the water, and in the interview with Mr. Tong, he said they got all the piles out bar one, and that was, so really the only thing of the bridge that is still there that I could ascertain was the remains of this one pile on the eastern side of the bridge. Mr. Trung is the district engineer of the Vung Tau Berea province. He was there when the old bridge was demolished and rebuilt in 2006.
Tức là anh có thể giữ những cái hình này làm kỷ niệm cũng được.
The traffic using the bridge was a lot higher. The old bridge also was too narrow, 6 meters wide. As a new wider road has been built to the bridge, causing a bottleneck.
It was government money that was used to build the bridge, and he said it wasn't like you built it. You went out there with, was it 45 men and just built it, started and finished it. This new bridge took 12 months to build, and it was when the money was available and when the contractors were available to build it, it was done.
Everybody involved, particularly on the ground in building Bridge 6, was young. I think the oldest bloke there was about 30. So we were young men all at the start of our careers, many of us national servicemen whose careers perhaps had been interrupted. It was a major and significant thing to do at that time in your life.
Well, all those chaps I served with out on the bridge, I'd serve with them again anywhere. The simple reason is we never had a great deal of strife. Everything ran pretty smoothly, and they were a great bunch of boys. Like, there was quite a fair few national servicemen amongst them, and they all towed the line. They all, you know, I just could not say anything bad about them.
Looking back at it, I see it as a positive experience. The people that I was there with, I have good memories, and quite often I think about them, what they're up to, what they're doing.
We relied on everybody else, right? And because we were all tradesmen in there, everybody had their own task to do, and you just let them do it. You didn't interfere with them at all.
The Australian soldier, engineer, over in Vietnam. They were working under the conditions they had to work under, and in the dirt, the muck, the rain, the bad weather, the storms each day at 3 o'clock and the whole thing like that. Everything that was adverse was overcome because these guys were well-trained soldiers, well-trained engineers, and were a credit to the Corps of Engineers.
We made some good friends, and like I say, they're still good friends today that we've caught up again, and the Nashos and Regs got on well together. You know, there might be an odd little thing, but which was done with a smile.
We were just a great bunch of blokes to be with. We were all good mates, and everyone looked after everyone, and that was it.
Guys that I served with friends for life. I was a dasher and I didn't want to be there. The last thing on my work mind to end up over there, but so by the marbles come up, so called marbles that they use at birthdays out, and I didn't have any choice.
Over there you were very close to out, like in the Bridge 6 where you lived with them for a long time, and you become pretty close, you know, and you were mates with everyone, but there were some blokes that you were sort of really good close mates with in the air. And it was like a big bond, you know, even today when you see someone you haven't seen for so many years, it is like a bond, and you know, and you just pick up where you left off.
I enjoyed it, to be perfectly honest. It got you away from camp. There was a degree of excitement about it. Night times were always something you think whether you're going to be safe at night or whether something's going to happen. But I admit that I just loved it. I thought it was great.
I don't know that the Australian Army has ever built a bridge of that magnitude, even in peacetime in Australia. So it really was quite an achievement to build a bridge with pile bents, reinforced concrete and steel bridge in a remote location in a remote country. I think that was one hell of an achievement.
So you can be philosophical and say the fact that Bridge 6 is no longer there is in fact a good thing. We were there to contribute to the growth of the economy of that province. The economy grew. For 30 years, our bridge made a contribution to the transport infrastructure of the province, and when it was no longer adequate, it was taken down and replaced. It was a project that went well. They knew what they had to do, they did it, and they did it well. And any one of them can be proud of the achievement that they made towards building Bridge 6.